Okay. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to read the remote participation from Governor Baker. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this public meeting of the Lawrence Airport Commission will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings and provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would review this meeting while in progress may do at any of the following access locations: Facebook, Lawrence City Council page, YouTube. All right. Can I have roll call, please?
Sharon Birchall,
Here.
Andres Castillo,
Here.
Bill Collins,
Here.
Danya Amador Matis,
Here.
Ernest Quartermash,
Here.
Dan Foley,
Here.
Bob Irving, Bob Irving,
Here.
William Pedrick.
Here.
All set? Thank you.
Yep.
Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have the approval of the minutes from November 18th, 2021?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there were no minutes included in your package. They weren't able to be provided, but they will be available at the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So next will be the reports, and can we have the Finance Committee report, please?
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me fine. As we did not meet last month, I'm going to start with the December financial reports. And as always, please interrupt me, or at the end of each report, I'm asking if you have any questions. So we first gonna go over the December 2021 report. And in December, we had an excess of revenues in the amount of $4,090 with 34 cents. And at that time, we had an excess of revenues for the fiscal year in the amount of $14,367 with 96 cents. If we look at the detailed expense report in December, we did have a couple of out of the ordinary expenses. One of them is, if you look under 5380, we did have a firewall put in that was in regards to our security system. And we also had under 5840 a higher expense, 7,100. That was part again of the soil testing on the property on the north side of De Rosa. Are there any questions so far for this report?
Christine, that was on the north side. And what did you say after that?
That's at the property of De Rosa, Charlie De Rosa, which is the Positive Start Realty land lease.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any questions to the December report? If not,
No.
then I will go ahead to the January report. In January, we had an excess of revenues in the amount of $26,400 $360.13, which brings us to an excess of revenues for that fiscal year 2022 of $40,728.09. We had no out of. Any questions on that report? I heard somebody in the background.
Actually, Christine, I think it was an echo of your
Okay,
report.
thank you. So the detailed expense report shows nothing out of the ordinary. So we had really just some overtime because of the snow and ice, and everybody's doing a great job who has to be out there. There's nothing more to be said actually to the detailed expense report, except do you have any questions? Then I go ahead to the tenant payment status. As you could see, I did send out an updated report this morning. I hope everybody did receive it. And there was a change which I highlighted. That was Chat Center Realty sent in percentage and landings collections, and West Side Hangar Association did pay up with the land leases. And looking at the tenant payment status, I can let you know that for next month, I will be sending out the usual letter we send in order to have all the land leases and percentages collected, because it seems like some of the percentages go a little bit way further back than we like to see. That would be all to my report. Open for questions.
Commissioners have any question for Christine?
Yes. Okay. I have
Who's speaking, Commissioner?
Andres
Okay,
Castillo, Jeff Center Realty.
Yes.
I do not understand the 507.1, 892.1, and 75. What is that?
That's the dollar amount they collected.
That what that collected?
Yes.
The what they highlighted?
Yes. The
Okay.
highlighted one that was collected after the
Oh.
first tenant payment status was sent out last week.
Oh,
That
okay.
is why
So
it got highlighted.
that means that they paid up. They paid
That
up.
is
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's all
Yes.
I have.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
any
Just-
other questions for Christine?
Christine,
Commissioner Collins?
thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question. Are we collecting penalties also on the fuel and the landings that are late also?
No, we don't. We collect
Only
late
on the
fees. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
We collect late fees on all the land leases that have the clause in their lease. And
Okay,
I
thank
sent,
you.
yes, you're welcome.
Any other questions, commissioners? Good job on collecting, Christine.
Thank you. I
Good
appreciate
job,
it.
Mike, during the winter and the snow and ice. Good job.
The staff worked very hard on it, so I'm very happy with the outcome of it as well. There were some conditions we couldn't unfortunately address because of atmospheric conditions. We can't plow ice off the pavement, and we can't put down salt out there, obviously. So we had to close the runways at times, but yeah, they worked very hard.
Good
And it's
job.
reflected in the overtime.
Yes.
I'll
good
make a
job.
motion to accept the January and February financial reports.
It is actually the December and January report. I'm
Oh.
sorry.
I'm sorry, you're right, December, January. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Collins has a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I second it.
By
Castillo.
Danya.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you so much, Christine. Good job.
It is my pleasure as always.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Next is the leasing committee.
Actually, I have not had time with the winter as it's been to meet with Commissioner Collins, but I think there's just a couple items, one on the old business that is kind of the leasing committee's agenda. And I think we could probably take that up and discuss it. And Mr. Kennon's available for that here on this call right now.
Okay, we can do that.
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing us to speak again. I'm Rick Kennon. I'm representing Boston Medflight tonight. And I guess just as way of background for those who may not be familiar, Boston Medflight has submitted 2 letters to the commission requesting to investigate future development on 2 parcels of land on the airport. We currently are in a lease in a Falcon Air hangar, which we've discussed before. We would prefer to be in a piece of property that we own rather than continuing to lease. A long-term lease is probably untenable for Boston Medflight. So we're looking at places on the airport where we could develop. We have been now on the airport for several years, and we are supporting the Merrimack Valley and with the community there, and it's important for us to stay at Lawrence. That said, we've started looking at 2 different parcels of land on the airport, one on the north ramp side and one on the east ramp. The north ramp adjacent to Jacobs Engineering and the east ramp at the base of the tower. We have retained an engineering firm and a design firm to look at these 2 pieces of parcels of land to determine if it is suitable for development for Boston Medflight for our future needs. We started out, the preferred piece of property for us, a parcel of land, was adjacent to Jacobs Engineering on the north ramp. Our engineering firm did a significant site assessment, and unfortunately they have determined that that parcel of land is not acceptable for our development due to the presence of extensive wetlands. And so we have decided that that's the piece of property, although it is level, that it wouldn't be acceptable for us to develop. So now we have shifted to looking at the east ramp parcel that at the base of the control tower. Unfortunately, because of the weather, the frozen ground, it took us a while to get the assessment done on the north ramp piece of property. And we have just in the last 2 weeks begun assessing the parcel of land at the base of the control tower. For that reason, Madam Chair, I'd like to request an extension of 1 month to make a decision on whether or not that piece of property is developable from Boston Medflight. We would like to release our request to develop the parcel of land on the north ramp. However, we'd like to continue to assess whether that parcel of land at the east ramp is something that we could develop.
All right. Commissioners, do we have questions? Mike, would there be a problem with that?
No, I've been working with Rick and his team, and as he indicated, there's a request on the new business to look at the land on the north side, but he started to do some due diligence looking at it before the commission was able to grant him authority to go over there. But it was, they walked it with their people, and they made a determination looking at it. There was no need to do any further discovering on it because it was not going to be suitable. So I agree with him. We should remove that request on the new business. And they have been focusing their attention now on the land adjacent to the control tower. And they've sent some preliminary drawings. And I looked at them and reviewed them with them yet this morning, yesterday, I think it was. And so they are going to go back and revisit what they can put there and look at the numbers. So I think it's an appropriate request because they are moving forward on it and they are working towards it. They should have it resolved by next month.
So do we have a motion on the floor, commissioners? Anybody have any questions for us? If not, can I have a motion on the floor?
I make a motion to extend the request, Castillo.
Do I have a second, Commissioner?
Second by Dania.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Madam Chair.
you're welcome.
Excuse
Rick.
me, Rick, what is your last name?
Kenin, Kenin.
Kenin. Okay,
I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Boston Medflight.
all right,
And-
thank you.
Thank you
And
very
Rick-
much. Next
Rick,
month.
just in case, if you don't want to stay, do we have your permission to remove your request for the land on the north ramp on the new
Yes, you
business?
do.
Can we delete that from the agenda? Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
you do.
All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. We'll see you next month.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Yeah, Rick.
Okay, should we do the other old business where it's leasing, Mike, or?
That actually was the communication from the town manager. That can stay there and I can bring that up and
Okay.
talk to it under my report.
All right.
Oh.
So is that all for the leasing?
That would be all for the leasing. Yeah, that was the only pertinent thing.
Alright.
There's another request on the new business, which is leasing related. Attorney Mann can discuss that when we get down there. We should be there
Okay.
rather quickly.
All right. All right, so do we have a motion on the floor to accept the leasing committee?
Motion made by Castillo.
Do I have a second, Commissioners?
Second.
Commissioner Ernie Quatamaj? All right,
Yeah.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Mike. Airport security procedures?
Okay, our security system has been installed, and at some point, everything was working as it was supposed to be working, but we've had a couple of problems, and they are being addressed. But everybody that's used it has given it rave reviews, and they're very, very satisfied with it, especially our airport manager. The two problems that we've had is that we have two towers which receive communications from all of the apparatus spread out over the airport, the camera, whatnot. And at some point in time, both of them failed. One of them has been replaced. The other one is being replaced as we speak. And another problem that we had was that some of the gates were having a little bit of a hard time opening and closing when the weather was extremely cold. And so the solution for that has been that they're going to put heaters in to keep the equipment warm. And that's it. Everything's working mostly.
Hey, Commissioners, any questions for security? No? If there's no,
Dan, you said the first problem was the cameras. There was some problems with the cameras.
No, there wasn't problem. There were problems with the two. There were two poles that receive the input and the messages from the cameras, and then they transmit it to. One of them is on the airport tower, and the other one is just outside the office. And the receivers and or transmitters on these poles have failed, both of them. One of them was fixed, and as they were fixing the one on the tower, the one at our office failed. And these cameras, these receivers, this equipment there's a supply chain issue with it, in that they're manufactured in Israel. And they're on order, and as soon as they come in, they'll be replaced, and everything will be working fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
all right. So do we have a motion on the floor to accept the airport security procedures?
I make a motion that we accept the airport security report.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Second by
Castillo.
Tatiana Amador.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So next on the agenda is the election of officers. So can we open up the elections? Can we have a
Madam Chair,
motion?
you need a motion
Yeah.
or a nomination of a chairperson, nominations for vice chair, and nominations for recording secretary.
Do I do it individually or can I do it?
The nominations for each position should be done individually,
Okay,
and then we can close nominations once all the nominations have been had for each position. And then we can take it from there in terms of voting.
okay. All right, so I'm gonna open up the nominations for a chairperson. Do we have a nomination on the floor, Commissioners?
I have a nomination. I like to nominate Andres Castillo for chairman.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that. Collins.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Congratulations. Next, we have a nomination on the floor for vice chair.
I have another nomination. I'd like to nominate you, Sharon Birchall, as vice chairman.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Bill Pedrick.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, we have recording secretary. Do I have a nomination on the floor?
I might as well make it a trifecta. I have a nomination. I'd like to nominate Bill Collins as the recording secretary.
Do I have,
I second it.
all in favor?
Who seconds, Ernie?
Yeah, Ernie,
Yeah.
Ernie Quatermash.
Okay.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have,
Madam Chair,
that's it, right?
that's it. Those are the offices. And
All right.
since there were no other nominations for others,
right.
you could just cast a single ballot for that board. So Andres would be chair, you'd be vice, and Mr. Collins would be recording secretary.
Do you have all that, Carla?
Yep, I have. The nominations for the chair was from Dan Foley, and he nominated Andres Castillo, and it was seconded by Bill Collins. And then the nomination for the vice chair, Dan again, and he nominated you, Sharon. And I have William Pedrick as the, let me see, I lost this here. Bill Collins and then Bill Pedrick did the all in favor. And then the recording secretary, Dan, nominated Bill Collins. And it was,
Ernie
Ernie.
Quatermash.
Yep, and Bill Collins, I'm sorry. Yep.
All right, so now,
At this
Andre,
time,
to
yep,
pass over my,
you're passing the baton to Andres.
Andres, all yours, darling.
Oh, my God. You and I are gonna play together.
We appreciate the service and
We're
hopefully,
gonna have to set up the same place to live, same house, okay?
well, there's
Right.
the traditional gavel that will be coming to be passed to the outgoing chair. So we'll have that ceremony at our next meeting that we sit together, hopefully March, if not definitely in April.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so it's all yours, Andre. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
I'll
Sharon.
take over.
Thank you
Thank you.
also.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank
Thank-
you.
Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much. for your-
Been a
for
tumultuous
the-
2 years.
The good
You
work.
took us through COVID.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we are now at old business. There's the communications from the North Andover Town Manager, which I could address here, or I could do it under my report, however you'd like to see that. I think we lost him.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Mike.
I will take up under old business. There's the communication from the town manager.
Yeah, well, okay, go ahead.
Yep, if we could just have a motion to discuss the communications under old business.
Motion. Make a motion.
Actually, no, you don't have to. I apologize. I was looking down at table matters when I was talking to myself. As you may recall, back in the fall, we received a communication from the town manager of North Andover, and she wanted us to do certain things, and one of them was to maintain a complaint log. So I copied or produced the complaint log that I've been keeping since that request in October, and I put it in your package, and you will see that we've had 13 complaints from that time till now. And you'll also notice that many of those complaints, and I believe it was Commissioner Irving that wanted to know the identity of the individuals to see if it was the same person calling multiple times. Many of them do come from the same individual in the same location. One of the more prolific individuals lives down on Belmont Street in North Andover, which is just off the departure end of runway 23 or the approach end of runway 5, how you choose to look at it. And he lives near the train tracks and the highway, but he often calls complaining about the sound of the aircraft, but more particularly about the emissions coming from them because his wife has asthma. But it is, again, that one location at the departure end of a runway or the approach end of a runway. The next most often phone calls come from an individual who lives in the Glen Forest section of Methuen, not even in vicinity of the airport, far removed from the airport. But she has concerns over the altitude that planes are flying when they're flying near her residence. She lives over behind St. Teresa's Church, to give a landmark for people to understand. Kind of in the vicinity of Route 110 and Route 93. A lot of times her complaints are regarding helicopter operations that have turned out to be either police on the highway or power line survey and so forth. But she's the next most frequent caller. And then there's an individual who lives on Bradford Street in Haverhill who actually, her complaints to the town manager generated this request. And she lives at the departure end of 5 or the approach end of 23 on Bradford Street. And her primary concern is not jet traffic, it's the practicing that takes place with the single engine propeller aircraft. But as you see, she's not really that frequent of a caller. I've had numerous conversations with her when she calls, extensive conversations, and she's a very reasonable person, and I understand she has a concern, but it's not exactly that there's something not proper taking place. It's just that what is taking place bothers her. I just wanted to go over this, and you all have it to show that, and thank you, Commissioner Irving, for suggesting that we make sure that we take down the name, because you can see that definitely there's only 3 people who are calling, and since October 24th, that's primarily the same 3 people over and over again. There were some outliers, such as the town of Methuen's police department called because Raymond Turkey Farm called them back in October. There was an issue with a helicopter flying and shining a spotlight into their barns. Turns out it was the state police assisting the local police. And we've had a call from a person who lived in downtown North Andover and a person who lived near Heavenly Donuts in Methuen on 110 and Mystic Street. But again, an outlier. She was alarmed by the early morning departure that took place over her house. But other than that, that one call, have not heard from those 2 individuals. Otherwise, it seems to be the same 3 individuals, 2 of which live on, in close proximity to the airport, or the departure or arrival end of a runway, and 1 who lives in a remote section of Methuen who is concerned about the altitude of aircraft flying over her house. So there's really not much we can do when they're that far, and they're not even necessarily from the airport. They may be transiting through the area, but they happen to be near her house, so she has a concern and she calls us. And that's it. And that's all I want to talk about regarding the communication from the town manager. I would ask that we still keep it on. We continue to monitor this, because as a request that was made was that we actually take a study and undertake a study as an airport to determine whether or not the housing changes within the town, the demographic shifts, so to speak, may have occurred since our last master plan study and since the last time we had a citizen advisory group together. So my understanding was from our meeting in October was we should keep a complaint log to really see if there is an issue to determine. And I think this is starting to show that it's an isolated issue with 3 individuals, 2 of which are town residents, and that further study on our part to observe the complaints that are coming in to determine if we should take up the cost of doing a full town-wide study on their housing situation. And I think as it's showing out now, it's really, if you don't live at the end of the runway, you're not calling to complain. So I think this is good data to have. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but Mike, I have a concern about, I was reading the article or the letter they sent you, but when they moved to that area, did they know that they have an airport and the helicopter had to fly up in the sky and the plane had to fly up and make noise? Didn't they know that?
I think she did. She's lived there her whole life. I did talk to her about, I think you're talking about the individual from Bradford Street. And she did say she lived there her whole life and she knew the airport was there, but she said something changed in 2020. And something did change. Her lifestyle changed. She's home now. And so where she used to go to work and then return home, those planes that may have occurred all day long when she was at work, she wasn't perceiving them. And so now that she's home all the time, she perceives them. Our operations are definitely up, but they are nowhere near what they were in the early 2000s, you know? So, but yeah, she understood, and she agrees that, you know, the airport was there, and it was there when I grew up, and it never bothered her. She just feels as though there's much more traffic today than there was in the past. Statistically,
Okay.
that's not true. It's just that her time at home is greater than it was in the past because she was
Right.
working before. Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you. It's, yes, that I was surprised to receive that letter, but it just shows how it's impacting her.
Okay. Okay. So what? Next would be table matters.
No, there's nothing on the table. Next would be new business, and would be the Flightland data and Attorney Mann. And on behalf of Mr. Florence, and I can fill in whatever gaps exist, but I think Attorney Mann's going to do a very thorough presentation. And this is really an attempt to correct the wrong that existed for quite some time here, and just get the paperwork to follow what's actually taking place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Jill Mann here on behalf of Michael Florence, who is a leaseholder for property out on 250 Clark Street. That's where the Flightland Data Building is, and there are actually two structures now. So I'm here this evening, and I want to also note that Michael Florence wanted to be here tonight, and he was very upset that he couldn't be, to be able to say hi to everyone. But he's traveling, and there was no way for him to make it because of the time of the meeting. So he wants to apologize and extends his good wishes to everyone. Relative now to his issue. So back in, I think Mr. Florence reached out to Mr. Miller maybe a year ago, maybe not that long ago, but sometime earlier in 2021, and asked about the lease on 250 Clark Street, which included two properties, one that had been leased back in the 90s, and then one that had been leased in 2013. So we thought. So what ended up happening was, in the 90s, there was a building built, and it was a hangar, and now we do have an operating aviation company operating out of that hangar. They needed more space, so in about 2012, Mr. Florence came before this board and asked if he would be allowed to expand his lease area so that he could construct a similar sized building. The existing building on the property that he had since 1990 is about 10,000 square feet. So he's looking to double that and to connect the two buildings because it was the same property, but required an additional 30,000 square feet. So at this time, I don't know, I know some of you were on the board at that time, but at that time you were going through some sort of a change with regard to your lease form. So you didn't want to sign the lease right away, but what you did do is tell Michael, go ahead, build. It's not an issue, build a building, we'll resolve, and approved the plans. We came back in, gave you the as-built, everything. And then once you finalized your lease form, it took a long time for you to do that. We tried to get back on the agenda, and Mr. Miller and I went back and forth trying to do that. We couldn't get on, something happened. And lo and behold, 2013 became 2021, and we still don't have a signed lease. Obviously the building's up. Mr. Florence has been paying, consistently throughout the years for that building. So to Mr. Miller's point, what we're looking to do is rectify the situation and to simply confirm that the lease did in fact was approved by the board, and then sign a lease that would be coterminous with the current lease. So effectively we'd say, okay, let's start it April 1, 2022, and then it would extend till March 31st, 2042, which is when the lease that is on 250 Clark Street will expire, just so you have one lease term for it. And that is the long, short story of it. So I don't know if the commission has questions or anything, or if Mr. Miller can fill you in on something. So tonight, we're just simply seeking for the board to vote to confirm, and then to allow Mr. Miller to distribute to me a lease that Mr. Florence can sign and the commissioners can sign. Thank you very much.
Mike, you have anything to say
Other than
about
to say
that?
Attorney Mann did a wonderful job summing it up. That's what happened. Mr. Florence has been paying us for the square footage he's been occupying. And this would be a 20-year lease, and it would terminate the same time their existing far greater termed lease. I think they had 45 on the other parcel. So they'll coterminously end at 20 years from this April. And this will correct the commission did vote to give him a lease on that land, and he went through the permitting process, and they ended up building the building. And it was at a time we were looking at changing provisions about penalty clauses, and it slipped through the cracks. And so now it's just about righting the wrong, giving him his 20-year lease, and then that parcel will be able to be released 20 years from now by somebody else as one large parcel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we make a motion to accept that?
I would just suggest that we have a motion to confirm the vote to grant Mr. Florence a 20-year lease.
Yes, anybody make a motion?
I'll make a motion to confirm the vote.
Who's
Bob Irving.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Attorney Mann. And
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will call you, Mr. Miller, to just round up and get the paperwork signed.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Next will be Skyline aerial request to tow banner.
Skyline is one of our usual banner towers that operates out of the airport. I know that he was invited, but he may not be on this call. I can't see him. Gene, if you are there, the commission annually, in order to tow banners out of the airport, you have to seek permission of the Airport Commission. And Mr. Gray is a perennial requester, and the commission in the past has always granted his request under the terms that he has to continue to pay for towing fees that are charged by the airport for his operations, and he has complied. He always pays.
How much is the fee for that?
$12, I believe.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I'd like to make a motion to grant Skyline aerial.
Yeah. Second, any second?
Second, Foley.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion pass.
Thank you, commissioners. Number 3, we can remove from the agenda. We heard from Mr. Kennan that they're not interested in that site any longer, so we can just remove that request from Boston Med Flight.
Okay, you talking about Boston Med Flight?
Yes, number 3
Okay.
on the new business.
Anybody make a motion to remove from the agenda?
Upon the request from the petitioner, I make a motion to remove it from the agenda.
Any second?
I second, Ernie Kudamash.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Correspondence regarding 27 Charles Street.
Yes,
Note- Mike,
in your package, you will see a correspondence from the law firm of
Rubin and Rudman.
Thank you. I don't seem to have it in my package. They are representing the owners of 27 Charles Street, which is a commercial office building on Charles Street, basically at the threshold of runways 523 at the approach of the runway 5. And the building is suffering, as of last year, a large amount of water cascading over a hill, down the hill, across their parking lot, and at times, not all the time, but at times reaching their building and flooding it. So I want to thank the representatives of Stantec on the call that are here tonight, and others who are not here tonight, because when I received the letter, I reached out to them, forwarded the correspondence, and they immediately got to work on it. In the letter, they alleged that we ignored their concerns. I met with the gentleman in July for the first time when it was brought to my attention, and he showed me pictures of the water pouring through our stream and into a culvert, and explaining the damage that was going into his parking lot. And I had indicated that the culvert's working, and all the water that you point out that's our stream is working, and all the water is going into that culvert. But then it happened again in the fall, so I agreed that I would walk the land with him, his partner, who happens to be also his wife, and their engineer. And we walked it, and we made a determination that the cause was not coming out of what we perceived to be the new engineered side, and their engineer indicated there was no sign of topping on that area. So we started to walk through the neighborhood, and we found a cause where we saw it jumping out of the natural occurring stream, the intermittent stream, and then shedding across a roadway, across our property into an abutter subdivision and down the hill, and pouring right over the side into their parking lot. They at that time spoke with representatives of the neighborhood, and they showed them pictures and videos of the water, torrential water going down through the neighborhood and backyards, and again, following that direction, going over stone walls and down into their property. It was left that the engineer was going to reach out to me to get some information in order to do a stormwater study on the area. Ultimately, I think they went to another engineering firm to do that study, and they then partnered with this law firm, and that the result of the study was the letter that we received 2 weeks ago. So I immediately contacted the city attorney, because I do not represent the airport as their counsel. The city attorney represents all city departments, and she has been in communication with them, and we've worked out a time and place tomorrow morning, and 3 representatives from Stantec and myself will be walking through the woods in the rain. It was a perfect time, because it's the best time to see it is when an event is occurring. And we are going to walk with the Conservation Commission administrator, their engineer, and the property owner. So we'll be able to follow the issue and make a determination what should be done immediately to address their concerns about water that we can handle. Some of this is not on airport property. And then to have a discussion, a meeting of the minds of the experts, the engineers, to determine what exactly is going on and how can it be remedied. And is it Mother Nature's fault? Is it Mike Miller's fault? Is it anyone's fault? So that's going to take place tomorrow. So this meeting is timely tonight, because it introduces the issue to the whole commission. I did speak with our chairwoman last week about it, and I just want to make sure the commission understands we didn't just blow them off. We actually gave them opportunity. We identified for them the location where the water is coming out of the natural stream, which is ironic that that's what their professionals said. We have a belief it's coming from this location, when in fact I'm the one who took them to that location, not that particular engineer, but the party in question. But in any event, we're working, and I want to thank Stantec again publicly for their efforts. They are 100% behind us and committing a lot of resources to address that letter. And I'm ready for any questions.
Any idea what time you're gonna go over to see that?
We are going at 9 a.m. 9 a.m.
9
We'll be meeting at their parking lot, which is news to Dominic, who'll be one of the participants, and we'll probably start scaling the hill. So we're going over the top. We're going to be World War I all over again.
Okay. Tomorrow it's gonna be a rainy day, I believe.
It's going to be the perfect day to see it.
Oh, is
Perfect
it
day to see
perfect
it.
day tomorrow? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, it's going to be a great day to see it. That's why
Oh.
we're very happy that they agreed to see it. They wanted to go on Wednesday. It would have been, we would be just walking the land and pointing where we think it's coming from and that type of thing. Tomorrow, we're going to actually see it in real life conditions.
Okay. Do we need any motion for?
No, but I just want this on, if we could put it on the old business, because obviously it's going to be something that's going to be ongoing. So I just want to introduce it to the commission tonight, and then we'll move it up to the old business section of the agenda.
Okay, do we make a motion to move it to all business?
That would be fine.
Anybody make a motion?
Collins,
Yeah. Second it,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion moved. Motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you. I know this has been a long meeting going on, and I don't want to be the first meeting of our new chairman. It's going to be the extent for one. So I've got a lot to say, and Stantec will have a lot to say as well. So I will try to not be redundant and talk about the projects that they will be talking about. First and foremost, all our staff is doing well. No COVID incidents, thank God. You heard Christine talk about an expenditure for environmental testing that we did over on the north side of the field and the property that was leased out by Mr. DeRosa. The Conservation Commission was concerned that there could be some contaminants in the ground. All came clean. It's all good. The borings and just get the results yesterday and forward them to the North Andover Conservation Commission. We actually had first round of testing in December that came back and they showed one tiny trace of potential lead in just over the reportable threshold. So they wanted to do a second round of water testing because it could have been an anomaly, and it turns out it was an anomaly. So we forwarded that information off to the town. It's clean, everything is good over there. I'll have a meeting probably with the Conservation Commission next Wednesday on that topic, just to make sure that their experts are in agreement with our experts. The equipment for snow removal, we heard a lot of overtime. Equipment has been very good this year. We haven't had any major breakdowns with it, so that was a good thing. We are going to have to do some maintenance, preventative maintenance on the equipment over the summertime. So we'll be getting prices and coordinating that to take place. Our plow trucks are 2004, so that puts them at 18 years of age. It's time for some fluid changes in the transmission and some hydraulic changes. Our working foreman has been doing a great job keeping them together. It's his recommendation that we need to do some service on them because the transmission on his truck is starting to act up, and he believes it's because of the age of the transmission fluid. So we'll be working on that. We are starting, Christine and I sat down yesterday, but she's been working on it for a while. We're working on our budget for next year, and we have pretty much boiled it down to what we think will be a good operating budget. But we're going to have some very large capital improvement projects next year, very significant ones that are going to require us to go to our retained earnings account, probably to the tune of $675,000 to $725,000. But those projects are good ones. We are going to be building a taxiway that's fully parallel to 1432. We're going to connect Taxiway Charlie, which is over by the control tower, run it right through the center of the airfield and meet it up with Taxiway Foxtrot, which is over by the sanitary district over Methuen by the river. So that's close to a $7 million project, a little bit north of $7 million. And also we're budgeting for, because the state has told us in 2023, a new administration building. So we're going to put that money in our budget. So we'll be prepared, because I know what's going to happen. There's going to be a phone call. You're ready to go. And so we want to make sure that our money is there and ready to go. So that's why there's a need to go in for the retained earnings. And we have enough. We have $786,000 in our savings account. So we've got enough to pay for these projects, which puts us in good place, because that's why the state is looking to build a building with us, because they know we have our money available for the matching share. I've gone over the two projects. One of them also is going to be an navigation easement project, and that is a pretty significant one that when it comes time to go forward with it, we don't have enough money to do it. It's going to be a reimbursable project to the FAA and the state, but they said we have to spend all the money up front. And that's about $1.2 million to do it. And that will be to acquire easements and remove obstructions for all the trees that are approaching penetrations into the airspace. So I have to sit down with our budget and finance director and see if we can tap into the city's retained earnings in a short, loan, because we will get 95% of that 1.2 million back from the state and federal government once the project is complete, but we have to front that up front, and we just don't have that available. The city does. They could either choose to lend it to us from their retained earnings, or possibly maybe float a short-term bond that we then pay back. And that interest is a legitimate expense that you can get reimbursed for from the FAA and the state. So we'll sit with him and determine how we're going to do that. On the good news, I've talked about spending money up to now. On the good news, we did receive an airport rescue program grant from the FAA. And early this month, we received the grant award, and it was accepted by the city through the mayor and the city attorney's office. We received $59,000 to help combat essentially COVID and the spread of COVID. So it will reimburse us for our expenses for cleaning and disinfecting and sanitizing around the airport to combat that. That's all I have at this time. I'll ready to answer any questions that any of the commissioners have and fill in any more detail of what I talked about.
Anybody have any question for the manager?
Mike, did you say those trucks, dump trucks were 2004?
Yes, yeah, they're 2004. So we're looking at what, 18 years?
No, geez, I could swear we bought them in the last 10 years or so, no?
I wish we did. No, time flies, Commissioner
Wow.
Collins. Now, the 2000 Irvin Deck, who's on this call, was the gentleman who orchestrated that purchase. There were 2 plow trucks and a broom for a loader, a spreader for our Airport 4, and we still have it. We still have all that equipment, although the spreader has finally died. So that's going to be a purchase we're going to make at the end of this year, if not next year. But so 18 years of the trucks, I think they look great.
Yeah.
They look fantastic. But we take care of them, and we have staff that really appreciates having a good piece of equipment, and they're responsible. So we're fortunate in that respect. We're very fortunate.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Any more question? Or concern? Okay, next would be public comment.
Mr. Chair, on the call, we have representatives from Stantec who I know want to fill in the gaps that I may have talked about a project or two. They're going to give you more detail on it, tell you what's going on. And I see Mr. Irvin Deck, who some of us are familiar with through the advisory committees for the master plan, and Dom Cesaro could talk more about the building projects and anything else you have a question on.
Irv, do you want me to go first, or do you
Go ahead and
to?
go first, Tom. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah, mine's pretty brief, but I can give you an update on the new airfield lighting vault and then the taxiway project. So on the vault project, the building was installed just after Thanksgiving. So if you've been to the airport since then, you should have seen it. It was delivered in 2 pieces that were then joined together. So since the installation, the contractor has installed all the equipment inside the building. They paved the driveway in front of it, and then they've run some fiber optic cable between the vault and the air traffic control tower. So now we're really just waiting for the building's transformer to be delivered, which keeps getting pushed back, but it's scheduled for mid-March right now. Again, just supply chain issues is causing that delay. So that is the last piece of the puzzle. Once that goes in, they'll be able to put the new vault online, and then they'll demolish the old one. Any questions on the vault? All right, on the taxiway project, as Mike said, the project will improve safety for the aircraft operating on the airfield by correcting some non-standard airfield geometry, which, as Mike mentioned, extending taxiway Charlie across the airfield to connect with taxiway Foxtrot, and then it'll remove taxiway Delta. So last week we had a good meeting with FAA and MassDOT to review our preliminary design. So now we're just working on progressing that design to 100%, and then we'll have another meeting with FAA in a few weeks to review the final design. And then towards the end of March, we'll put the project out to bid. Hope we get some decent prices from contractors. And then we will apply for state and federal grants for that project. And FAA will fund 90% of the project, MassDOT 5%, and then the airport will kick in the other 5%. Any questions on that project?
A question?
That's all I have. Irv, if you want to take over.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Mike, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And Mike, my hair was a lot less gray when we bought that equipment.
You have hair still. I had a lot more hair when we bought that equipment.
That was a long time ago. Anyhow, I've been obviously working on the master plan, and if you give me maybe 5 minutes, I can walk you through some of the highlights. We are making excellent progress. We've had, since the last time we talked, which was quite a while ago, we've had several meetings with the FAA and the state, and I have presented the latest findings to the planning committee. I think we did that last week. And I apologize to the committee. we're going back and forth on one of the projects, so we still haven't resolved it yet. But Mike, if you let me share my screen, I can walk everybody through it.
I'll do that right now.
Okay. And I got to figure out what screen share.
All right, you are now the host.
All right, I just got to figure out how to show my screen. There we go. Hold on. There we go. You should see the airport layout plan. I hope, hopefully you can.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. I just want to walk through some of the key highlights of the master plan. Now, what you're looking at is the preliminary airport layout plan. That'll be the outcrop of the study we've been doing. Some of the highlights, and I know we've talked about some of these things in the past, some of the requirements. Two of the requirements are that eventually you might have to narrow both runways down to 75 feet. As I told the FAA and the state a few weeks ago, that would be held in abeyance until the next time the runways are due for reconstruction, and then you would reassess whether or not that's required or not. But the airport layout plan will show that. On the plan itself, the green areas are areas where pavement would eventually be removed if the projects move forward as envisioned. So we show both runways being narrowed down to 75 feet. The other thing we're recommending is runway 32 to get rid of that runway displacement, move the threshold, the landing threshold back to the edge of the pavement. That will require the removal of some obstructions in the approach surface, one of them being the little strip mall that sits out there now. The top of the building is actually obstructions, but I don't think they can get rid of the smokestacks and whatever the vents on top of the building. So eventually you may have to look at acquiring that property. And I'll talk about that a little more here in a few minutes and why that's really important. The other projects are the taxiways. Dom already talked about Taxiway Charlie and extending that across the runway and connecting that with Foxtrot. That plan is underway right now, and that'll definitely happen. And then there's a plan to add this small stub taxiway right here to connect it to the runway. The tower thinks that's going to make it a little bit easier and faster for aircraft landing on runway 32 to exit and then come back to the north ramp. As Dom said, Taxiway Delta will go away. The one taxiway project that we haven't really narrowed down yet and confirmed whether or not it should move forward is straightening out Taxiway Alpha, making it a true parallel. There is some concerns that in doing that, you'll run into some wetland issues right in here because of swells in there. Randy Christensen, who I think most of you know, our environmental scientist, is concerned about that and whether or not you could ever get an environmental assessment through. Mike and I have talked about this project subsequent to the last planning committee meeting. And at this point, we agree that it should probably be on the plan. It's just doesn't hurt anything. It'll never move forward if it's not on there. So we're at this point, we're reasoning that it's probably best to put it on there, and let's see where it goes. This could be a long-term project, meaning that the earliest it might happen would be 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So we'll wait and see. But we still have to get through the next round of FA discussions on this. But I think we can sell that project at least to get it on the airport layout plan. Like I said, whether it ever actually comes to fruition is a whole different story. Other areas we've looked at, let me just double check my notes, is hangars. We know from the study that you have an existing shortfall, deficit of hangar space, and we predict that you're going to probably need in the next 20 years about 50, I think it's 52, it might be 57 additional spots or slots. So we sat down with Mike, a couple months ago, my assistant and I sat down with Mike, and we come up with some areas where we're comfortable that you can construct hangars. And those are the blue rectangles and boxes that we see on the airport. There's several right in this area, some T hangars here, another T hangar in here. This is a transition of an old T hangar to a much bigger one. There's talk of converting these two hangars right in this area to one large conventional hangar. That itself won't add any additional spaces, but it's just, we're showing it because that's something that the hangar owner wants to look at. On the north ramp, we're looking at a large row of box hangars right in this area. We can fit in, clear the wetlands. We know from the study that the apron areas are not being used nearly as much as they used to be. So you have a surplus of apron space, but a deficit of hangar space. So we looked at ways of converting some of that apron into hangar space. So you can certainly get some hangars right in here. And you might still be able to retain some of the aircraft parking if you had to, for long-term parking over there. And then the last area we looked at was we can put some T hangars up in this area right in here. You can actually get the units much bigger before we get into wetland impacts. But for now, we're showing this area right here. So the combination of all these different slots or spots will give you, will fulfill the requirements of the master plan and finding enough hangar space. One area that we studied and we did not come up with any, well, we come up with a recommendation, and that was the Runway Safety Action Team has an issue with the number of vehicles that are crossing the runway, privately owned vehicles by the FBOs, not airport vehicles. There's a lot of activity where they're crossing back and forth across both runways between the north and the south ramp. So the FAA had asked us to look at the possibility of putting a perimeter road on the airport. And after looking at the design, the airport layout, the only possible alternative would be to bring it around runway 32, back up behind the Jet Center and back along the taxiway and around runway 5. The problem with that is that we run into wetlands and we run into issues where we would have to get the perimeter road in there, we would actually shorten the runways to make room for them. We also looked just out of curiosity about what it would cost to put a tunnel under part of one of the runways, particularly in this area right in here. And again, the cost was just astronomical. The rough estimate, this was a very rough estimate, was just for the tunnel was about $16 million. So we decided after looking at all these different options that it was just too expensive to try to come up with a perimeter road concept at the airport that would justify the cost and the offset of losing some runway pavement. So our recommendation in the master plan is that these vehicles will just have to start driving around on public roads to get between the north and the south ramp. The last area we looked at is, it might become a little controversial. I mentioned it briefly earlier. That's the runway protection zones. I'm going to switch over to, I hope you see it. Google Earth. Can you see that now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, there's your airport, obviously. And the red trapezoids are the 4 runway protection zones. The FAA would prefer, in the perfect world, that the airport has control of those areas. Again, a runway protection zone is there to protect people and property on the ground. It doesn't have any elevation structure to it. It's not like an approach surface. It's strictly a flat surface on the ground where the FAA would like not to see any kind of activity where a large group of people can congregate. Churches, hospitals, schools, obviously, and residential areas. So what we're looking at, we looked at the 4 runway protection zones. Runway 5 is completely on airport, runway 2, 3 is completely on airport property. It's totally under your control, no problem. Runway 14 is mostly off airport property, but because of its location, there's steep slope, railroad tracks, which are okay, and the river is not an issue. There's no activity going on in there now or probably in the future that would ever create a problem for the airport. Runway 32 is a little bit different story in that you have this business here that I talked about earlier, and you have part of a strip mall here and the ice cream stand in here where you can potentially have congregations of people that would gather. And again, the RPZ there is there for one purpose, and that's to protect people and property on the ground in the event of a crash. Heaven forbid it ever happened. But these are areas that are identified as the FAA because the most probable location for an aircraft crash is right off the end of a runway. So this is going to get a little bit further study in the report. We're going to probably recommend that in the long term, when the property becomes available and money's available, that the airport eventually look at acquiring these properties. And then you could turn them into something else that's not going to see a congregation of people. It's still a question with the FAA of whether or not this particular business here would constitute a congregation of people. I think at some point you do see large groups of people in there because they are businesses, and particularly the ice cream stand. So those are the two areas. And again, what I told the FAA, and they seem to nod and agree to it, is that we would recommend putting this on the plan in the report. And it would become one of these things that you acquire the property. There's no rush to go out there and do it. The FAA doesn't require you go out there and do it tomorrow. It's not like obstructions. Just as time permits and as money permits and the property becomes available, that you look at acquiring it. And I think somebody threw out in the discussion, it could be a 99-year project, and it could very well be. The more controversial one, of course, is going to be Runway 5. And for those of you that live there, you know, it's a very busy area. There's a lot of businesses going on there. You do have some large businesses and parking lots that probably would not qualify as being areas of congregation of people. But there are private homes and some other businesses down in here that you would have to look at. So the report, we're going to identify those different parcels, and then we would make a recommendation in the report which ones at the airport you consider acquiring in the future, and obviously which ones that you don't have to consider. And again, you can see that how that's controversial. When the public eventually learns about this, there's probably going to be some questions like, you're coming after my property. But as I told Mike and as I told the FAA, we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't do our due diligence and point this out as something that has to be considered in the future. So I think that's it in terms of changes to the airport layout plan that we're looking at. We are in good track. The plan is to try to get this wrapped up by the end of March. I think the timing is really good for it. We do have a public information meeting on next Tuesday, February 22nd. It's part of our scope of work. There's 2 meetings planned, this one, and then we'll do another one probably in a month as we get the final report put together in the final draft form, and we have all the financial data put together in it. But this one is scheduled for Tuesday. Mike has issued the advertisement. We're going to do it on what's called Teams live presentation. I think that's the term, something like that. And what it is that anybody that wants to participate will be given the access link to get into the, it's a web-based program. They'll get the access link. Mike's going to publish it in on the airport webpage and in the town, on the city's webpage. And anybody else that wants it, I can email it to them. It's the advertisement will have that information to them. But again, it's next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Mike and I will be presenters. The public can participate to the point where they have questions. They can type them into a message block. And then our producers, I have a couple people working behind the scenes with me that they'll see the questions pop up. And assuming they're an appropriate question, they'll forward the question on to me and Mike to answer. Inappropriate questions and comments like that probably wouldn't get passed on. But we've used this successfully in the past and it works very well. Hopefully we have a good turnout. Keep my fingers crossed. But that is pretty much my presentation for tonight. And I hope you have some questions. And if so, I can certainly answer them for you.
Okay, anybody have any questions or concern? No?
Well, hopefully your next meeting, if it's next month live, I can be down there live in person and I can have some charts and some plans to hand out and walk you through them.
And Irv, just commissioners, I will send out the agenda and the link to all commissioners so that if you choose to, you can join the meeting next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock.
That's Mike, that's gonna be this coming Tuesday, right?
Yes, it'll be this Tuesday, the day
Tuesday.
after President's Day.
At 7 p.m.
Yep.
Okay. All right, next would be when chair commission comment. Any commissioner have a comments? Correspondence. Next meeting will be, I think it's on the 18th, March 18th.
Mr. Chairman, It appears to my calendar to be March 17th. A
Oh,
very special
17th,
day
huh?
in my culture.
I'm sorry, it was 17. Yes, it's the 17th, that's right. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn, Ernie Kudomash.
Second it,
I'll second the motion, Patrick.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we see you next time, hopefully
Thank you,
in
commissioners.
person.
Thank you.
Good
All right.
evening,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
evening.
everybody.
Good night now.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
take care.
Bye-bye now.
Thank
Bye.
you, next time. Bye-bye. Bye.
How do we get out of here?
Okay, that's it.
We're trapped.